Hi, Kylie here and welcome to my plan with me for May 2022. All right, so we're starting a new journal this month. I can fit 8 months into one of the Archer and Olive journals and then I need to start a new one. So 3 journals make up 2 years. I'm okay with that. It works quite well and I get all the things that I need, so it's great. Now, don't think I'm going to show you drawing up the entire calendar and all of those sorts of things. This will skip through pretty quickly. But of course, had to have a calendar. It's useful to have that. I know that I have this in my phone. I'm aware of that. But it is really quite easy to just open it up and flick through and go, yeah, well, you know, this is where we need to do this and blah, blah, blah. And have that calendar there. I find that I often refer to it. So it stays. I get to keep it. And then, of course, my future logs. Now, for any of you who don't do bullet journaling, who are wondering what the future logs are, effectively, I draw every month up of my diary. This is what my bullet journal is. It's my diary. Effectively, I draw it up as the month happens. So that means that when people are talking to me about work they want me to do in August or September, that's where I capture it in the future log. So any appointments I make, any work I need to do, all of those bits and pieces get captured in there. Then when I draw that month up, I transfer everything from the future log into that month. And that's how I get to manage and sustain my diary, if you're wondering how that works. Now you know. So drawing up my goals page, I've got my book for my Year of TED, the one that's going to have all my sketch notes in it. I'm joining my websites together, and at the end of this month I will be starting another circus showcase, which we will be doing our performance at the end of July. So that'll be a lot of fun and very interesting for me. Now, my development logs worked really well in my last sort of admin pages for my last journal. So I decided I'd chuck them in again. I took social media out. So I was tracking like social media in the posts and everything, and I'm really poor at it, so I just didn't. Now, if you're wondering why this has popped up in here, this was my title page for my bullet journal last year in May. And you know how I was going to keep the themes very similar. So I was going to do circus again, and that was my intention. And then I started sitting down thinking, well, what will I do? I don't want to do the same thing that I did last year, think of something else. And I just loved what I did last year so much. My brain just refused to do anything with circus. So what I did instead was I went, okay, well, why did I do circus? Well, circus is my happy place. Okay, well, where else is my happy place? Here. Doing my bullet journaling is my happy place. It's one of my other happy places. So I decided I would do that as my theme, which I know is a little bit meta, but you'll live with it. So because I'm doing it as a pop-up, you'll notice I've really sort of crammed everything over to the side because this is quite a large pop-up. Again, sometimes I need to remember the size of things before I start putting it all together. Now, this I actually did at the end of the whole process. Whenever I do a pop-up, I always do it at the end because it creates quite a lot of bulk. You know, it really creates a lot of bumps and things as I'm doing the rest of it. So I do it early. I do it late. And I think you can hear my dog snoring at the moment, which is fun. So there's 2 pop-up mechanisms. This one is where I'm going to stick the journal. And you'll notice I drew a little like Archer and Olive journal with all the dots. And yes, all the dots are hand-drawn, which made Derek just roll his eyes at me because he's like, that's not dotted paper. No, I drew them. Yeah, obviously I had too much time on my hands sometimes. The second mechanism up the top is basically to do a rotating arm. So that was just me sort of going, is there going to be enough room for this or is there not going to be enough room? I put the watercolor palette onto a rotating arm, which just adds a little bit of, just some different movement in there. So what happened there was I put a tiny little bit of tape to just check that it was actually going to move properly and wasn't going to be obstructed before I just stuck it down properly. So then what I did was drew up a whole heap of other little artifacts that I use, tools that I use when I'm doing my bullet journaling. So paintbrushes that I usually use for my watercolors, one of the Staedtler pens that I use. I have a lot of different black pens. I chose the Staedtler because that seems to be the favourite at the moment. One of the mechanical pencils that I use, an eraser. Next to the watercolour palette is a glass. Of course, this is all looked down from on top, so you can't necessarily tell that's a glass of water. But yeah, so I just put a whole heap of random things around to help flesh out the happy place that is me drawing up my bullet journals and going through and doing that stuff. So yeah, nice and easy. So I think I like it better to do a theme where I'm not actually saying it's exactly this thing, rather things that are meaningful to me. I think that might be the way that I tend to go with it in the future. We'll see how that goes. So doing my trackers. Now you might have noticed when I flipped the page before, you saw the quote while I was doing my pop-up. That's because I did the quote at the end as well. So you'll see that. You actually won't really see it, but we'll get to that. But yeah, I didn't know what quote I was going to do when I started drawing it up. And you'll notice I haven't penciled anything in for this. I've broken the cardinal rule that I created for myself when I got sort of like 5 months into my first year of doing this, which was, oh, I can't just wing it. I need to pencil these things out. I broke that rule this month because I just sort of went, oh, no, I'm all right. And largely I was all right. Largely it was all okay. But at the same time, there's one layout that I'm not overly happy with because I started doing something and it didn't quite work. And so then I ended up just sort of, adapting and adjusting. And it's not my favorite layout, but yeah, I'll probably go back to penciling them out again properly. But I just didn't have a lot of time this month. And yeah, sort of shown in the way this has come together in some ways. But yeah, broke the cardinal rule of not penciling it up. So there you go. That's how things work sometimes. So yeah, this layout for the first week, I decided I would do a couple more of the pens that I use a lot, which are my Tombow markers and my brushable pens. So I don't draw in my bullet journal a heap with them now because I err on using a lot more watercolor. But whenever I do use any markers in here, they're either Tombow markers or brushable markers. They are my favourites. So I decided that they needed to be part of a spread because they're my favourites. So that's just how it is. So we're into May, into the 5th month of the year. And I'm hoping things will slow down a little bit so I can get on top of the projects that I need to be doing for myself. As I mentioned, I'm joining my websites together, which will be tedious enough in itself. Mainly doing 200 odd redirections of blog posts, but we'll see how that goes. But yeah, basically just going through and doing that is going to take a bit of time. So hopefully I'll have a bit of non-client time to be able to do that this month is the goal. Let's see how that goes. So yeah, as you can see, I just decided, I play with a lot of watercolors, so let's just do some random watercolor stuff for one of the layout pages. Again, didn't have a heap of time to get this done, so that was just one of the other layouts. And then I was doing this fairly late last night, so it was after 5 when I was sort of sitting down and doing it. I don't tend to do a lot of really structured work later at night. My brain is far more of a morning brain than it is a night brain. So I will sometimes draw on sitting on the lounge and those sorts of things on my iPad, but this sort of stuff I don't tend to do after a certain time of night. And this is the reason why, because I forget to press record. So, hey, but anyway, so yeah, I sort of was a little bit stumped for what my quote would be, went back through and had a look for some quotes for drawing, because that's effectively what the happy place of my bullet journal is, and came up with this nice one of drawing at its best is not what your eyes see, but what your mind understands. and that's from Millard Sheets, and I really quite liked it. It just sort of like spoke to me, and not just for the artistic side of things, because there definitely is that, of the meaning in art and those sorts of things, but it also really spoke to me for the graphic scribing work that I do, because the drawing that is part of sketchnoting and graphic scribing is really there to help add context and meaning and understanding to the words. And so this sort of spoke to me for that work as well, which, I know wasn't his intention, but this is how it works. So interestingly enough, I got to the end of this and I went, yeah, it needs to be framed up. It needs something down the bottom. I need to do something. And then I started painting this and I'm like, oh, this is a nightmare. I don't know what I'm doing. And then I went, well, I'll put lines over it because I always draw over my watercolor anyway. And I'm happy with how it came out. But this is what happens when you don't draw up exactly what you're going to do. So yeah, it's one of those things. You experiment and play, which again is exactly what my bullet journal is for. It's part of my sketchnoting practice. It's part of my sketching practice. So yeah. So anyway, here is my bullet journal for, my beginning of my new one, and then May 2022. So my fun little pop-up, quote, trackers, and then the layouts. So thank you very much for your time. I hope May is good for you, and I hope to see you back in June. Thanks. Bye.